Welcome to our second weekly broadcast. As we discussed in the last live broadcast, this week we're going to do something a little different and just drink some tea together and quiet and be together. I hope you guys all have some tea, some nice hot water, some good place to sit and be at peace in your home. Very important in these troubled times. So just let's all drink some tea, and though we're not together physically, we're, I guess, together virtually, connected through these cameras and etc. We can share a little peace and quiet and space and energy and calm, drink some tea together. was nice. Certainly better than just listening to me talk, I'm sure. We have some, we have some questions we can get to, but also I just want to, for this week, give you something to contemplate, which is a lot of people around you, a lot of your own thoughts within you will speak to this crisis in terms of like getting back to something, like get back to normal. Let's get back to normal. And I think that that type of thinking, whether it's coming from your own thoughts or it's coming from outside, we have to protect against that type of thinking in general and in a crisis like this. Not just when there's a crisis, but in general, that type of thinking is inimical to presence, to present moment awareness. There is no normal. By normal, do you mean a routine? Things that we do over and over again, because that doesn't really exist. Every new moment is unique, and things will never be what they are moment to moment to moment. They are always unique and new. Dogen Zenji said the Tao is to rest in that which you've never heard and that which you've never experienced. And that which you've never heard and experienced is always this moment. And a huge part of our suffering, a part of our problem, because much more of our suffering, as I mentioned last week, is in our imagination than in reality. When you begin to meditate and become self-aware, you realize how much of your suffering is actually mind-made and thought-based, and how little of it is actually based on real situations that can be dealt with. And when you get distance from the thought-based, mind-made problems, you're also more equipped to deal with the real problems that are left over, which actually you will find is the minority. There's no percentage, but you'll find the vast majority of your suffering is in your mind. It's mind-made, it's thought-based, and when you release that, what's left are real challenges, situations, and that having released the thought stuff, you're now more calm and centered and able to respond to those issues. Like a doctor, when if somebody comes in the emergency room, if the doctor freaks out, they're of no assistance. They have to stay calm. We talked about this last week. So this present moment awareness, when you let go and get some distance from thought-based problems, you realize also that every moment is unique and fresh, that there is no normal, there's no back to anything. There's just ongoing change and unfolding in new directions. And that habit pattern of, that habit pattern that says, let's get back to normal. I understand what it means on a relative level. But that habit pattern is tied to an egoic resistance to the present moment. It's a mind that is like not now but later. A mind like that this whatever is not enough. And the real key to human happiness and to spiritual cultivation is really at its essence about wishing for this. Learning to wish for what is. Learning to want what is. In a lot of the imagery in Buddhism, a lot of the bodhisattvas, they often have a jewel. It's called a chintamani. It's a wish-fulfilling jewel. So it's like Aladdin's lamp. It's a magic ball that grants all their wishes. So it's saying like for the enlightened one, all their wishes come true. But this is really a trick, like most things in Zen. It's a rascally symbol, because the reason that the enlightened one's wishes all come true is because the enlightened one wishes for what is. So if you're always wishing for what is, then your dreams are always coming true. It may sound absurd, but it's actually very powerful and very deep, because if you're, even when suffering comes, even when challenges come, when things are difficult as they are now, and you're passing through some form of suffering, if you're aligned with that reality, then that suffering becomes medicine. It makes you stronger. It's also a part of life. If you want to praise life, you will have to grieve life. They are one and the same. So you will have to learn to grieve. So, a life passing through grief is still being alive, and you are alive to feel grief. So that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. So when you're aligned towards wishing even for that, you see that most of our growth happens in those times of challenge, in times of suffering and contention and struggle. And so you wish for that too. And the times of peace, of course you wish for that. And then you are shifting the habit of the mind away from its desire to escape where it is. It doesn't want to be in this moment. It doesn't want to be in this body. It doesn't want to be home. It's a big part of what tea is about. It's about coming back home. And home is, of course, first and foremost, this body. This body is my home. And second of all, home is this moment, this present moment. So we coming back to this body, back to this moment, and wishing for this moment. We can contemplate that deeper, but wishing for what is, even when it's painful. And certainly for a lot of people, there's pain in the world today. And words are no consolation. But this idea that we're going to get back to normal, right? There's nothing to go back to. Each moment is unique. And so that, as a habit that's coming out of a habit in the mind that can frustrate one's ability to be present. In an everyday sense, I understand what that phrase means. Let's get over this epidemic and get the economy going again and all that stuff. I agree. But that type of thinking is really antagonistic to a practice of being present. So it is an argument with reality. It's an argument with the way things are. And this is ultimately, as the Buddha said, the source of all of our suffering. We want what is to be is not, and we want what is not to be is. We want what is not real to come, and we want what is to go away. And we are constantly fighting against reality. And you realize that on a more deep and fundamental level, when you do that, you're not trusting nature. You're not trusting nature to work things out. You're not trusting nature to grow in the way that it wants to. Which doesn't mean do nothing and be a zombie. That's the other extreme. But actually, the knowing of when to put efforts and where and how is really the whole skill and art of living. But most of us are overexerted. It's not an issue of having no drive. We have too much drive. We're constantly trying to manipulate the world to be what we think it should be, trying to wrench it into places. And all that overdoing is really harming nature. So we need to learn to go with the flow, let the world be as it is. And actually, when you let the world be as it is, as I said, you are in a state of mind that is more effective to actually take action and work with it and change it for the better than when you're frustrated with it as it is and arguing with it. It's just like if you're really frustrated and angry with your beloved, you won't be able to rectify the problem, you'll just fight. But if you're calm and centered and present, then you'll be able to solve the problem. So the charge against the moment gets in the way of actually being effective in action. So this idea that we're going to get back to normal, it feeds a habit pattern that takes you away from the moment. And that habit pattern then, when you do arrive even at some success, you won't really be there to enjoy it, because that will just kick in again, that habit, and you'll find something to be something lacking in that moment, something missing, something not enough, and you'll just project yourself into another future. So in order to learn and grow and take nourishment from suffering and challenge, and in order to effectively deal and respond to crises, we have to cultivate more of a present mind. And also when you step back and get a large perspective on this crisis, and you step back and you look at the way that we were living as human beings before we took this pause and things have shifted and changed, maybe it's worth asking a question collectively and as an individual. I don't have an answer to this question. It's just a question that I could ask myself, I could ask all of us, which is, do we really want to go back to the way that we were living? Is that the way that we really want to live? And that question is both collective and personal. Do I want to go back to the way that I was living before this crisis happened and I was forced to go into seclusion and be alone more? And do we as a society want to go back to the way that we were living as well? Those are both just questions. I'm not offering an answer. I'm just offering these questions. So, from the Buddhist perspective, chaos is just nature rearranging things. And so the attitude is, let's wait and see what happens. Let's wait and see where the flow goes. And in the meantime, I cultivate myself. Every moment of pause, when there's not an opportunity to serve others, that is an opportunity to cultivate myself so that when the next opportunity to serve others comes, I'll be more equipped to do so. Because I'm very broken and damaged and dented and have a lot of problems. And the more that I have some time to deal with my stuff, the more that I can be of service to others. In the first place, I can be of service just by making the world a little bit lighter in the sense that it's free of my stuff. And I'm not putting my damaged goods, I'm not projecting that onto others. I'm not, so I'm at least saving other people from my stuff, from my defects of character. And this is a wonderful opportunity to, even though it comes with suffering and pain, and it is a hard push, it's also a wonderful opportunity to cultivate oneself and to work, as any pause should be. Whether that's a pause in the day, or a pause in the week, or a pause in the year, or a pause in the whole world due to a pandemic. Whenever there's a pause, that's an opportunity to cultivate yourself so you'll be of more service when the next opportunity to serve arises. So take this opportunity and to go within and to practice and cultivate yourself so that you can be of service when the opportunity arises to be of service, and that when this pandemic passes and we're in this new spring, this winter of flu and influenza, corona will have left, and we will come out into a spring. I mean that metaphorically, a new world, people literally coming outside for the first time in months. There'll be an opportunity for you as an individual to rearrange your priorities, to remember what's really important in life, and to recommit to your values. And the more individuals that do that, the more collectively something could arise from this that is positive. I think we have some questions.
Yeah, we have a few questions in the app.
From the app. If you're a GoTo app member, you can put questions in the app and we'll try to answer them. For these weekly live broadcasts, we're trying to focus a little bit more on things to do with self-cultivation. It feels a little bit to me, inappropriate to discuss like which style of spout should we use for oolong tea, or what's the difference between Dian Hong and Gongfu Red Tea. Like those kinds of geeky tea questions, I love them and I'm happy to discuss them all day long. It just feels like a little bit of an inappropriate time. So right now we're just trying to work with questions that have to do with cultivation in relation to Zen or Cha Dao, or things that, or life, and work a little bit more on that level it seems is what is needed for now.
The first question is from Jazz. He'd like to know what are your favorite English translations of the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra, and then also any other sutras you recommend to study during this time.
So this is a question about my favorite English translations of the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra. Well, some of you know who have been to the center that I myself have translated the Heart Sutra. I've been working on it for 25 years, tweaking it. I'm actually about to make another tweak. So that's one translation. I have not translated Diamond Sutra, obviously. That's a more in-depth project. I like, for Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra, a good place to start. I like Red Pine, who's a beautiful, amazing human being and Global Tiat member. Red Pine's translations are a little bit more academic, but centered, and that's a really good place to start. I also appreciate the translations of Thich Nhat Hanh in the Plum Village of both of them. I think they take a little bit more poetic license in their interpretation when they translate. But I don't really have any issues with that. I just don't know that it's the unless you're in that lineage. If you're in that lineage, then obviously that translation is super 100% ideal for you. Otherwise, I don't know that it's like the best first option, but it might be a really great second option. Because translations, the more translations you read, the better of anything. Because a translation is always a translation. So the more you read, I can remember when I was in university, I studied Asian philosophy, and my first Taoism class, I took 3 levels. It was like Tao 1, 2, 3. In Taoism 1, we arrived at class on the first day, and the professor came in, and a bunch of hands went up. And he said, "Put your hands down, I know what you're asking. You're wondering why when you went to the school bookstore." In those days, nowadays, university is probably very different, much more advanced and electric. We didn't have internet in those days. So you went to a bookstore and all the course numbers were there in the bookstore. And you found your course number and there were the books that were needed for your course. And so all these hands went up and he said, "Put your hands down, I know what you're going to ask." You went to the bookstore and you're wondering why there's 15 different versions of the same book listed for this course. And yes, that is correct. I want you to go buy those 15 books. And it was 15 versions of the Tao Te Ching. And that was only, so that course had a lot of books, but it taught me something valuable, which was like studying so many translations and those types of translations where people take poetic license. Like in the Tao Te Ching, an example is Stephen Mitchell, who like reinterprets the Tao Te Ching. It's not even an attempt to translate. So I wouldn't recommend that as a first copy of Tao Te Ching. But certainly if you're familiar with the Tao Te Ching and you've read some more literal academic translations like Thomas Cleary, then that reinterpretation might open up new doorways for you. It might make some things click that didn't before. So I really like the Thich Nhat Hanh translations of the Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra, just maybe not first. I would start with Red Pine. In terms of the Heart Sutra, ours is really good. We've given it away, including the chanting of it, because we chanted in English. If you email globaltihat@gmail.com, we would be happy to email you my translation of the Heart Sutra. But I really like Red Pine as a good start for both of those two. As far as other sutras to read, so many. Personal absolute favorite right here. I reread it every year or two, and I'm right in the process of reading it again. The Lotus Sutra. This one is for me really good, important one. It's obviously so many more. You could spend a lifetime just with the Heart Sutra or the Diamond Sutra, or the Lotus Sutra. any of these you can spend a lifetime with. I hope that helps you to begin your exploration of those.
So another question we got from James. He'd like to hear about your inspiration the poems in your book Fallen Leaves?
So someone is asking what was the inspiration for the poems in my new book Fallen Leaves. Well, the inspiration obviously was tea and Zen. So they're based on, Zen has a way of, one of the beautiful things about Zen is that it is one of the lineages in the world. This is very unique. There are maybe some other lineages like this, but none that I know that do it as well or as pronouncedly, which is to acknowledge that this thing we call Zen is not it. Right? Most traditions of the world are saying, hey, what we've got is it, and other people are wrong, or just, hey, what we've got is it. But Zen is always, Zen, they say, is like a stall selling water next to a river. It's a sham. It's a cheat. I feel the same about teachers. Spiritual teachers are shams. And anything I say is a sham because the truth is the mountains, the truth is the sun, the stars, and the truth, most importantly, is inside of you. And the last thing that I want to do as a teacher is to create any form of dependence. In fact, I would rather somebody who comes like seeking dependence or seeking something, they want to turn me into their story of a holy man and they want to get something from me, which is just not going to happen. And I would rather very forcefully stop that and they get angry and leave. Even if they leave and go find another teacher that they can attach to dependently, I'm still okay with that because I feel like maybe I've planted the seeds of independence. I've planted the seeds. At least if you think about it, when they say, hey, this Buddha's a jerk, and they go away to another teacher, that act, at least that act, was done, they were following their own heart. In that act, nobody was telling them what to do, they were following their own heart. So the very seeds of following their own heart were sown. And Zen is the same way. It celebrates itself as like, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. This Zen thing is not it. It's a way of pointing at it. And so Zen has always had a healthy dose, a healthy sprinkle of some spice, a healthy sprinkle of irreverence, some irreverence, right? And that irreverence can even be very strong, and it's tolerated. But balanced, so it's like the monks are really irreverent, but then they're chanting the Heart Sutra irreverently. And so there's a beauty in that. And so there's a need for humor, right? In India they have a saying, right? Beware the religious person who takes themselves seriously. Those dudes, cause violence. You have to be able to laugh at yourself, at your practice, at your absurdity, at even the absurdity that, we have a saying in Zen, I think I mentioned it last week, immersed in water, you reach out for a drink, which is like kind of what we're doing now with this broadcast. You're immersed in truth. You're immersed in reality. You're immersed in being. You are being. It surrounds you. The truth is in the air. It's in the plants. It's in the animals. Everything is preaching the Dharma. And yet you reach out for the Lotus Sutra or the Heart Sutra or for a live broadcast with Buddha. So like you're immersed in water and you reach out for a drink. Even that is hilarious. Do you see? There's a kind of silliness to our stuff. And so Zen has always had a celebration or included a celebration of that absurdity of itself. Just a self-awareness that few traditions have. And that's pronounced in me. And so the book is like that. There's a lot of the poems are, you could read them as jokes, but also what a joke does, if you actually think about a joke, what a joke does is quite powerful, actually. If you analyze it philosophically, which you shouldn't when you're joking. When you're joking, the point of a joke is just to laugh. But if you actually step back during a time when you're not joking and you think about it, what a joke does is it starts out along a track of like something normal. something known, something everyday, mundane, something that we're used to. So like a man walks into a bar. It starts out along a line that we're familiar with. And then all of a sudden, very quickly, it turns right into the absurd. And the better it makes that switch into the absurd, in terms of like wittiness and cleverness, and also in terms of like how quickly it makes that turn. That's the punchline, right? As it turns into the absurd, something like clicks in the mind, and we get out of that familiar. We get out of that routine, that same mind that I started this lecture talking about, where I said like we want to get back to normal after the coronavirus pandemic. That mind of like not now but later, that mind of familiarity, of routine, of automaton, that automaton mind that's going around in habit patterns, going around in circles, right? When we hear a good joke, we right turn out of that mind. We start in that mind, familiar mind. A man walks into a bar, and then we take a turn boom, into the absurd, and the whole body convulses, and we're super present. When you're really in the midst of laughter, you're not in thought-based suffering or mind-based realities. You're fully present, especially when it's a belly laughter. So a sense of humor and more laughter, more jokes is a surefire sign, I believe, that one's progress in Zen is moving. Right? A sense of humor is a necessity, and it's also just a symptom of getting better. Because the more insight you have, the more you see clearly. The more you see clearly, the more it becomes absurd. And the more absurd it becomes, absurdity, you can use your intellect and approach the absurdity of this universe, because there's a part of this universe that is not sensical. Because the universe is far bigger than our limited human minds could ever make sense of. So, though we will make sense of far more than we possibly could imagine making sense of right now, just as we have made sense of far more than people 300 years ago could have imagined. People 300 years in the future will have made sense of far more than we could imagine. But still, there will always be far more than we can make sense of. And so, this universe ultimately is absurd, and if you approach that intellectually or philosophically, the way that some Western philosophers have, when you come to that abyss of absurdity that surrounds what we have made sense of, you can go crazy and kill yourself. This is like Derrida, or you get to the places where like Nietzsche went or Sartre, where you just approach the nihilism of it all, the meaninglessness. And no other animal on this planet can do that. We can come to that absurdity of existence, right? And it can become desperate. But that's only when you forget that we are the only beings that are able to approach that abyss of absurdity, but we're also the only ones that have a language to communicate with it. And its language is laughter. Right? That's how you communicate with that absurd energy, that frequency that's always there. It's like 92.5 FM or something. It's always just waiting for you to turn the knob. You can go along the familiar road, a man walks into a bar, turn the knob, boom, and we're in the absurd. The absurd is always there, right? The absurdity is always there. And we have this language to speak to it. We have this laughter. And so laughter is very much a healing tool. It's a powerful voice. It's very, very deep and profound. So you can read the poems as just jokes, but you can also see that shift is, in this case, in the case of Zen poems, that shift is more intentional than a joke. The joke is about making that shift in a way that makes people laugh. Whereas with a Zen poem, the shift, the priority is not laughter. If you laugh, great, but that's not the priority. If that's all you get from it, though, that's fine. In some ways, because the laughter is nonsensical and it is, when we laugh, we're present, we're in our body. It's a good state to be in laughing. It's healing also. Heals it, breaks up stagnant chi in our body, shakes it, gets it out. Laughter is incredibly healing. But in this case, it's like some comedians are very clever, very witty, And I watched recently some comedy, and the whole 1 hour comedy show, this was, maybe 6 months ago, the whole show, I don't remember the guy, but he was very smart. And the whole show was just really one story. It wasn't a bunch of random jokes in random directions, which is also okay if a comedian does that, but this wasn't. This was just one long, basically, joke. And it was very, very witty and very intelligent, because this joke would reference previous jokes he said 20 minutes ago and reference back. And they were very clever and very, very architected. And so that's kind of analogous to what a Zen joke is, because it's architected. It's not just like what will make people laugh the most. He. It's like when it makes that shift to the absurd, it does it in a very certain place and for a very certain reason. And so, along with laughter, if you walk away and all you got from the poem was just laughter, that's fine. But along with that, you could, if you want, contemplate why the poem turned at that point and what it's saying by turning away from sense at that point, right? So the poem was starting out making sense, and then it shifted away from sense to nonsense. Why did it shift to nonsense at that point? What is that point? What's the reason? Why is the line there, in other words? Why is the cliff face? Why is the drop off at that point? And beyond which only nonsense can go, only mystery can go. So that might be helpful in your contemplation of these things.
Max Lasevich is asking, hi family, my question is, may we have a specific or special type of meditation for this time, or may we add a specific part in Metta Bhavana?
Yeah, very, very wonderful too. I mean, metta is for all beings, and certainly for beings who are suffering, praying for suffering beings. But again, as I said last week, you personally may have become more aware of the fact that humans are suffering around the world. But humans were suffering around the world 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. Where were you then? Right? So all that's happened now is that the news has awakened you to the suffering, because more of the suffering has a single cause. Right? Because it has a single cause and a single voice and a single reason, it has alerted you. But that was always there, and so praying for the transition of beings, that was in your life, you see, because in order to survive, other beings have to die. That's the price for life. And it doesn't matter if you eat animals or plants, something dies. It's sacrificed. And so honoring that, grieving that, working with that aspect of life, it was always essential. It was always important. It was always there. And so now you're being alerted to that, and you're being alerted to the fact that beings are suffering around the world. What can I do about that? I can cultivate myself, number one. I can be of service. I can pray. But number three, I mentioned this last week, and it's worth restating again. No dying being begrudges other people's life. That even the animal that gives itself to another animal at the moment of death doesn't begrudge it. Right? So a dying person isn't like feeling like, God damn it, all you people are living. Right? It's not. It doesn't work that way. There's no begrudging life. The dying person, part of the pain that they're experiencing is that they love life. And they don't want to let go of it. So of course they love life on a deeper level, wherever it is. And you love life, which is why you're sad that people are dying now, because you love life. Be a lover of life. A lover of life begets more life. And I don't mean physically like reproducing. I mean beget more life. And so, what I'm saying is that you're not dishonoring the people who are dying right now by being healthy and not dying. They don't wish that of you either. They're not like, I wish everyone would come join me in the corona ward and we could all die together. Nobody wants that. Even the people with corona who are dying don't want that. They do not You do not, just by being healthy, you don't need to feel guilty about that, in other words. What you need to be careful of and what you need to feel guilty of, what does dishonor those people, is if you take your life for granted. If you just assume that tomorrow it's your turn. In other words, stop taking it for granted, and you will be, and you will honor them then. So these are the things that I can do. I can cultivate myself. I can pray. I can serve others, and I can also just not take life for granted, and love life and create more life and do things that create life instead of things that bring people down. Uplift people, uplift yourself, uplift the world. So I think our time is up. I thank you for joining me. It seems more healthy to sit and drink some tea first before we have a discussion about gibberish. We'll continue to do these every week and try to do them at different times so that we can get like Europe and the United States. Hang in there, stay safe, stay present, stay focused, stay peaceful, feel the warmth of the bowl, taste the tea, smell the tea, feel it in your body, stay embodied, stay present. Deal with the issues that you can deal with in this moment, and let there be some distance from those issues that are mind-made and imaginary. I love you very much. Stay peaceful, stay happy, and stay centered so that you can help others around you to stay centered through this troubled times. Thank you.